Right, we're nearly back. I think we'll get started. Welcome and thank you for waiting, Steph and Stephen. I'll pass to you, and we are now in, which is on page 130, long-term plan, draft consultation document. Thank you.
Thanks, Your Worship. Councillors, I hope you've had an opportunity to read the draft content of the long-term plan. What we're looking for today is it's not so much about the details, as this still is a working document. It's more just about level of comfort with the direction of travel and the main themes that we've brought up about it. It's quite different to previous consultation documents we've done in LTPs, as it's not about what colour you're going to paint the sports centre or how big you want to build the pool. It's kind of about those fundamental issues of debt and deficit and split of rates. And we sort of came to that conclusion through sitting all the workshops, that despite all the conversations that went around the table, it always come back to those fundamental issues. So we thought, why not go back to the community and see what the levels of comfort are on these regards. The one thing is these are quite complex issues and we're having to explain them. I think the target reading age for these sorts of documents is about 12, so we've tried to do them in as accessible a way as possible. But we thought we'd take the approach before we set it away, get the designer to work over it, that we could actually get into it while it was a Word document and get your feedback on it at this point, and then we don't have to incur the expense of rework of trying to get design changed.
Alrighty. Yeah, Councillor Scott.
Couple of questions. I have a few. That looks terrible. Sorry, Steph. But I just did one question around page 131, 5.6. Can you just explain to me again? It says, please note the consultation document is not being reviewed by Audit New Zealand following the approval of an extension, and therefore an audit opinion will not be included. Can you just explain that to me again?
Yeah, so sorry, that's supposed to say exemption, not extension. So we were exempted from being audited on the consultation document.
Because that did trigger me a little bit, not badly, but when I was at audit and risk meeting, we talked to John, can't remember John, is it John? We talked about, and I could be confusing the documents, and I apologise if I am, but so you've got the consultation document, and he said, if you saw 3 years in a row of deficits, then they would need to audit the document, or have I got that wrong?
No, because...
So yeah, can I just clarify that? Yeah. The long-term plan is being audited, but not the consultation document.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was referencing an unbalanced budget more than 4 years, which was fascinating. So, yeah, his thinking was if you need to balance over the 10 years, but if you were more than 4 times in any 4 individual years unbalanced, then we would start to look at it, which is our last, although that's not reality, our last long-term plan, we only proposed to be unbalanced for 1 year. That wasn't the reality, but yeah.
So as part of the overall consultation, there's sort of various levels depending how deep you want to dive. This is really the sort of the veneer that sits on top of the process, but we do have links and all these things to the documents underneath, so you can go sort of down to the every cent level if you want to, but to sort of increase the participation with people, you do have to give that kind of sort of executive summary version of it out there and let people make the decision based on that. It's still reasonably robust document that goes through lots of processes, but it's just we don't have to get it formally audited.
Just a comment from on one page 32 right at the top, and it just comes to the questions that we're asking to fully understand why we're asking them. You know, should we do more on infrastructure and less on community facilities as planned, or do less on, more on community facilities and less on infrastructure? What if our community tells us, you know, hey, actually, we want some glam projects and don't invest in infrastructure? It's, we've got to be careful with the question we ask, but I'm sure they're not necessarily going to reflect that, but it'll be interesting.
Yeah, so through you, Your Worship, we've done some more work since we uploaded this on Thursday. So we've actually added some percentages to those options too. So at the moment, over a 10-year plan, typically you'd be 80-20 split. The front end of this 10-year plan is a bit skewed with the 2 planned community facilities. So within that, the options of that question, we've added a 70-30 split and a 90-10 split too, with the approximate capital spend attached to those percentages.
Councillor Pai.
Just when you're talking about options, if this is a digital form, can you 100% assure me that somebody is going to be able to tick other and then write what they think? So they the 3 options we give them.
Yep, so every option has 1, 2, 3 and other. It's not solely a digital form, there's also going to be a hard copy in the courier and through the libraries and stuff, so they can scribble on. And we've had, I mean, over the years we've had every variation on submission, from colouring in sheets to works of art. So I mean, people do participate in it if you give them the option.
I just don't want to hear that we filled out the digital form and we had no choice but to pick one of those 3.
We've never done that before, but some people, there might be an issue in the form design and the signposting that we can work through as through part of this process.
Yeah, Councillor Whittington.
Sorry.
Sorry, and then we'll go to Councillor Booth.
Just on the debt cap question, I just think we should explain more what we mean. You've kind of got half the question and half an answer in there, but it needs a statement that council can borrow, or whatever the statement is, and it just seems to be missing to me.
Yeah, so we've added more to that one in particular as well. So we've added the effect on debt underneath it too. So for going with the preferred, which is the 2.5 debt cap, we've stated that the amount of debt would be 412 million, and also that we would reach 2.47 at its peak across the 10-year plan too.
And I understand that it's really big numbers, but just the really simple explanation that for every dollar or whatever in rates or income, the council can borrow X, which means our debt cap. It's just a really, I'm not making it a simple statement, but you know what I mean?
Yep.
So then when I step down, I understand what that means to an outsider.
Yeah, no, that's easy enough. I mean, what we've got at the moment is, so we say 2.1 times our income, but if we actually just drill down into that a wee bit more, that's absolutely no problem.
I just wonder whether we need to put in plain English that you know, the council can borrow a total of X, which would maximise its debt cap. We're proposing to go to here. Is that too high? So just really simplify it.
Yep.
So they don't even need the words debt cap.
And one of the things you're not seeing here is once the designer puts their eye over it as well, and we actually start bringing in some graphics and stuff to tell the story, that it should be, you're seeing it at its rawest and earliest form at the moment, because we just wanted to get the... Yep. Yeah, no, there's still work to be done, and they're clarifying. It's a great idea.
Yeah, and further to that too, we're also going to include your suggestions about definitions as well, quite early on in the piece, so people can refer back to them and understand what some of those words are, because some of them don't have an alternate word that you can use, which is unfortunate. So yeah, definitions will be good.
I think you do need language like debt cap in there. You put it in there. There is a cap. We know a cap, and we've set our own one. The other thing is that when you talk about, you know, like in people's simple minds, and you're totally right, Councillor Puddington, you know, people have got mortgages. They understand how they service that mortgage, and they understand what income they have in relation to that mortgage. This is the same principle. If you could show them that, because it's simple things like 2.8, and we're allowed to borrow in our own net debt cap at 2.1 times our planned income. You can put that analogy so easily around a simple mortgage, and then people go, okay, factored in there that it's over 30 years, and it doesn't land on this community as you put in here in this paper as well. Those sorts of things resonate with people, and as you say, you've only got a short time because no one's going to read all this stuff. If you can put that in a graphic, they'll, yeah, oh, that's right, my mortgage is, yeah.
5 times.
Yeah.
Councillor Booth.
Yeah, look, 9.1, Do you agree with the plan to peak? It should be increased debt to 2.5 times revenue, in my mind. And also in there should be that, are you happy for the council to spend 30% of your rates on interest? Because that's a fact. So, and if you mentioned the prior, and I guess consultation prior, where there's been no option to say do nothing or not go ahead, that's contrary to the feedback I've got here from our last consultation. And it was basically saying, where's the option to do nothing? And so I think the whole gamut of options should be in there. Negative or not, they need to be in there. So, you make a statement in here, debt cap, 2.5 debt cap, we can deliver most of our capital works. Well, last time we went out, that was actually 2.1. We can deliver everything. Well, actually, we haven't. And you might have to increase it to 2.8. 3 years prior to that, it was 1.5, going from 1.1 to 1.5. So, I guess, let's be honest and let's not sugarcoat it and make it one way or the other and clear.
Okay, so would you then suggest we change the wording on keeping the debt cap at 2.1? Would you want to change the wording around that, because that would effectively maintain the status quo?
Live within your means and cut your cloth to suit 2.1.
Okay, so if we added a few more pros and cons to that list, would that suit
No,
councillor Booth?
I think we decided that it wasn't 2.1. You've got to I take your point, but I mean, you've got to be factual.
That is effectively the do nothing option that we've put in, is the lower the debt cap or keep the debt cap as is. The problem we have is that the consultation document has to reflect the long-term plan document, and that does show that the debt peaks at. Whether that happens or not is a matter for discussion, but the document that we put out to the public has to reflect the interior, what's inside the LTP, so we're a bit sort of hamstrung in making statements that are against that. But we do do effectively, through saying keeping the debt cap at 2.1 and showing people what the ramifications of that are, that is the do nothing option.
And we could change maintain the status quo, because that's effectively what we're at the moment, if that's more comfortable with everyone around the table.
But people need to understand what that means in delivering infrastructure. You can't just go maintain the status quo, everyone will go yay. But what is the implications of that, which we don't have a whole... I'm sorry, councillor Booth, but we've talked about 2.1 and you were outnumbered.
What about running a balanced budget? Will we just continue not running balanced budgets? Should we consult on that?
I'm pretty sure we have had this conversation as well, and you can't say that. Yeah. In facts, again, I'm not sure where you got the 30% interest from. Okay, effective. According to Councillor Booth. We'll go to Councillor Piddington.
Just on the graphic, I get why we do council every day, but most of us think weekly, don't we? Income weekly, rent weekly.
I actually have a question on that anyway, because when I did the maths, it meant it cost 221 million to run council. Was that a year or over the 10 years? What is it? Or have I got my calculator on the wrong setting?
Yeah, I think you might. I'm sure that's over the...
You say
10
resident, do you mean ratepayer?
Nope, we mean resident.
No, residents.
How many residents do we have?
49,000 odds.
Times $12.60 times 365.
That was the... This was an idea we stole, because there's no good new ideas, and this was from Hamilton, where it showed the cost of running the city every day. Yep.
Yes, so that's the concept.
Is it OPEX and CAPEX, or there's kind of no, there's no definition around it?
Just trying to give a picture of sort
I
of
like the
10-year
picture, yeah.
10-year average, what we spend every day on stuff per person, and it's And it's not per ratepayer or per rating unit, because that takes all the differentials and stuff out. It's just for every person in the district, we spend X amount per day, per year, average over 10 years.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a,
It
To be
definitely
honest,
got
it's
to 221 million.
it's a bit of a gimmick, but it's, and the thing is, we will double check our sums before it goes anywhere, but.
Yeah.
I just think it needs, I don't know, in my mind, a little bit of, this is OPEX and CAPEX, this is over a year or something.
And to be honest, as we did it, we found some quirky things came out, like all the salaries are in corporate services, so that makes it look massive amounts in there versus people actually going to specific functions. So I mean, it will need a bit of finessing, but
Yeah, and we may also group a few of those activities together, because the group of activity statements will spell out exactly what those functions do too.
I guess I did the sums as well, and I was a bit worried at $12.60 a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks in the year, comes to 4,586 if someone else does that calculation, which seems high.
And even if you put a disclaimer at the bottom on mounted rating units and those sort of things, people are just, the 5 people that do those sums will, yeah. But there's some finessing, so let's get questions out of the way. Councillor Shannon, and then we'll move forward.
Overall, you're asking the question, is this the right direction to travel? I think so, very much so. Still, I think just about everything's covered here, but not necessarily consistently and in the same language from start to finish. And when you talk about debt cap versus peaking debt and what have you, and we talked earlier, Steph, about levels of service, I still hate that as a term. Nobody gets levels of service. But further on it says levels of service and maintenance. So it starts to talk about it in a way that people understand anyway. So it's all about, I think, a lot of it is about the language and ensuring throughout the whole document that it is the same language. And as others have said, and the analogy of the mortgage, for example, that the one is in there, as soon as I saw that, I thought, yeah, shit, that's bloody good. That's stuff that the whole world will get, that stuff. And so as much of that as possible, the infrastructure speak needs to be translated from Swahili to English so that the whole world can understand that as well.
that's the simplified version of infrastructure strategy.
I know it is. That's the scary part, isn't it? That is the scary part. But throughout, it's the right direction to travel. And the real challenge that I think you've got here is that regardless of how comprehensive it is, it's still too big. It's still too long. So to be able to make it more comprehensive.
So we've got 12 pages booked. We're aiming for 8.
Yeah, but it still has to be, for example, I think the sort of thing that would be a wraparound on the courier, for example. There must be somebody that knows how much that costs, about 5k or what. Yeah.
So we're planning on having a wraparound with courier, and just it's stuck in the middle again because it's the cheapest way of distributing it to us. It doesn't go to everyone, and I know that, but it's a good way of getting it. And we also have overruns that go in the libraries, service centres. We'll expect you guys to be going out and about and saying the good word about it as well. So there's that. So yeah, we've booked 12 pages, but I'm hoping to pull it down to 8. We are limited by some of the stuff that has to go in there, the précis of the infrastructure strategy and the financial strategy and things like that. And they have to be a true reflection of what's in the strategy. So if we simplify them too much, it goes, it doesn't meet the standard, but I mean, we can always sort of...
I know, but there's still, like, for example, the intros from each of the Nigels. Could there be a combined Nigel? For example, I mean, just looking hard at different ways to cut things down.
I mean, we could...
Two Nigels, scary thoughts.
You just use this one.
Yeah. I do sometimes think of that, and it makes me think of them singing in chorus, but, I mean, we could cut one of the Nigels. We'd probably cut.
It's not a bad idea. We'll take that, yeah. Or just merge them. Just merge them and just sign both. Yeah, good feedback. Councillor Pye?
I had an allergic reaction to the talk of making the fees exclusive of GST, and everything in that whole section about claiming GST and making fees exclusive, because we cannot make fees exclusive. They've got to have GST on them. I know the talk in the last council meeting was, yes, these are the figures, how about we treat them as exclusive and add GST on top? But we can't just go, we're making the fees exclusive. Thank goodness.
Yeah. Anything else before we move this consultation document? Mr. Cooper?
Through you, Your Worship. I was just noting that Vinci has been a bit of a warhorse for this process, and she's finishing up today for a few weeks, and I wondered if the Chief Executive might want to say a couple of words.
I was going to wait until we finished it all, but Vinci's been the power horse.
Sorry, push you.
Vinci's been the power horse around our LTP, and we've all done our workshops with Vinci, and she's soldiered on and made a fantastic document for us, and she's worked long hours, and hours that we don't realise she is working, but we do when we get a email or a text at about 3 a.m, which you go, wonder what this person's doing at 3 a.m, but she's doing the LTP. So Vinci's finishing up soon, and she is one of our precious consultants, and we're going to pick the mantle up internally and drive the thing home. She will be in the background helping Steph with the wedding, so I know she'll be back, because a good Italian woman don't just walk away. They have family, and we're part of her family, and they always come back and check on us. One of the delights with Vinci is she's fantastic at bribing you with food. So, yeah, kia ora.
Yeah, I would like to echo thanks from the governance team, Vinci, and I'm sure we'll stay in touch. It's a bit of a catch-22, isn't it? We're not going to have the vibrancy of Vinci around the building, but we're also going to lose weight. So that's a positive. Anything further in regard to this paper? Yes, Steph.
If you have any 3 o'clock in the morning ideas, we are welcome to them. Yeah, like Stephen said, it's a living document. There will be further adjustments that we'll make, extras that we'll do. So don't be scared to send us any ideas. We would love them. Ultimately, you guys are the ones that are going to be taking this out to the community and fronting it, so we want to make sure that you're comfortable with what you're taking with you.
Yeah, and make sure you are making yourself available for meetings and through that time. It's really important. Councillor Scott, and then you can move this as well, thanks.
Okay. I have a few edits, but I talked to Steph about those and I'll send them through. But just on page 151, and I know we've talked about this, but I'm having brain fatigue maybe, around sample properties, financial analysis, rates, etc. Is that on an averaged land, or because like that those figures do not reflect our document? So you know, for example, little old where did I sort of have not a giggle, it's going to come out wrong, Geraldine is like 18%. And
So these ones are only ever on an individual property. So we pick a sample property of a specific land value that is average for the area. Because every rates bill's different, depending on the services used, where you live and that stuff, we can only ever do a average property rather than a property that's average, if that makes any sense. So it is, sorry, no.
I just wonder
Pencil,
whether
but it's if your house was this exact
I know.
moment and on that exact street, this is how much.
I just wonder if it needs more commentary to it.
Yep.
Because when you start on that, on rates, it talks about 15, 12, 12, and then you get to the table, which everyone loves looking at a table, and they're going to go, well, hang on a minute, that's say 16, 16, well, 16, sorry, just stop there.
Yeah,
For
so we can expand on
residential.
any of the targeted rates in there if you want some, say what they are and what the rating difference is.
We can put Gavin's name and address at the top of it.
Might be. I mean, the one.
I think I think the problem is that we're striking at 15% overall, and then you've got variable factors. So if you look at our retail in town, they're 4 times. So even though it's still 15%, it doesn't work out at 15%, whereas primary, they're at 0.6. So, you know, you've got some variances like that that actually change the percentages.
It's a common thing we see with the media reporting of rates rises. They say rates going up by 15%, and no one's rates will go up by 15%. It's the amount we take overall. But everyone's an individual within that, and it's all swings and roundabouts, really. And that's why we put these tables in at the back to sort of reflect that, but it's a bit of there's a lot of slightly dull tools we use with these things.
In residentially, we need to talk about $10 a week versus a percentage, you know, that's the conversation we need to have, probably. But, so you just moved that, Councillor Scott, fantastic.
To move
And,
that.
Did I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Shannon, any further discussion? No, put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So we'll continue now. Additional LTP policies, 159. Gotta love the excitement of policy into the early evening, don't you, eh? Pass to you, Brendan.
Good evening, Council. I know you've saved some of the best till last. Thank you for your patience. So, to put this in context, the report before you, 9.11, is part 2 of the exciting policy extravaganza when it comes to the LTP. Chapter 1, Episode 1, whatever you like to call it, was a few weeks ago, where you considered the significance and engagement policy and the rates policy. The Treasury Management Policy was up for consideration at that time, but after a little bit of feedback and potential issues with alignment, language-wise, with the Revenue and Financing Policy, we pulled that. So now we present for you today the Revenue and Financing Policy and the revised Treasury Management Policy. Very similar flavour to Episode 1 in terms of we're looking for draft approval to proceed this through the process so that it can go to audit for consideration, so that it can go out for community consultation. I stress, as it says in Part 6 of the report, we're requesting that draft adoption, and there will be opportunities for you to reconsider it later in the piece. I'll just touch on a couple of quick things before I throw to questions, fully conscious of time, and noting that I've brought John along, man with all the knowledge in this respect. Firstly, in terms of the Treasury Management Policy, so we are required to have one, and it outlines our approach to liability management and investments. The track change document looks like a sea of red and blue because John got very excited in terms of consolidating bits and pieces. But in our opinion, if you look at what the material changes are, and this is in part 12 of the report, there's only a couple, such as under clause 2.2, confirming that the policy doesn't apply to the CCOs, adding in that language that was requested around our self-imposed debt limit, confirming how we review the performance of assets, and then also in Appendix 1, making that change that Bancorp suggested. I'll pause at this point just to see if there are any questions on this. If there are any questions about the policy and how it might or might not align with the revenue and financing policy, then maybe we can talk about that after I've gone through the revenue and financing bit. But for now, I'll just pause to see if there are any questions.
Councillor Pye.
I'm just getting in before Councillor Booth does. So 5.2. Originally, you've just changed the whole definition of revenue to be exactly opposite to what we've talked about in my mind. We always talked about revenue not including all those cash things, and why have we now added all those non-cash things back in? And it concerns me because all our conversations all along have been, when we're talking about debt cap, we should be taking out vested assets and all those other non-cash things out of that to get to the debt cap.
Thank you, councillor. Unfortunately, I wasn't party to any of those discussions, so I can tell you that the revenue definition is actually the revenue definition. The expenses definition there is a real expenses definition, and then we've added in cash inflows or cash income to represent the fact that there are many elements of income which are related solely to cash, and that these definitions therefore can flow through to any of the calculations or any of the implications on the rest of the policy. Certainly when I had not previously reviewed this policy, so I took a slightly different perspective than might have been applied previously. I apologise for any confusion about that, but in terms of what revenue is not cash. Revenue is the increase in value. But cash inflows and cash income, which in many of the discussions around this table have been raised, needs to be explicitly recognised as a separate thing. And I know you know all the technical elements of that. So we've tried with this process to start to bring this into line with not just like financing revenue policy, but all the policies so that there's consistency across how council is looking at all of its different elements. There may need to be further work. I absolutely have no problem with that if you need further definitions or tweaks to definitions, but it's important, I believe, and that's why I've presented it this way, for us to be clear about when we talk about revenue, what we're talking about across all the documents that council has, and equally we should recognise that when we're talking about cash inflows, cash income, that is not the same as revenue. That is a
I think
separate
we're
item.
definition missing. The definition
Yep.
needs to be added in is debt cap, which says this is the definition of the debt cap. It's this divided by this.
I agree, because I think I 100% agree with your explanation about what is revenue and what is cash. Where the confusion is when we use revenue, which I think is determined a different way for our debt cap, and we need to have a definition around exactly how, because I've looked for it and you can never find it, so we need to have that definition in there of exactly how we calculate our debt cap.
And I don't think, I would have no disagreement with that, and that's part of trying to extend these definitions so there's clarity. Councillor Booth has often raised the point about, hang on, what does this mean? And I think we need to be very explicit about what these things mean, and such questions and issues, I think, need to be addressed in this process now. I agree.
May I add very briefly to that, and noting that I don't understand necessarily the technical details fully, thanks John, but two things. Firstly, fully endorse the idea that we're trying to get to a point where there's a fully fleshed out definition that is agreed on so that we can make sure that we're talking, comparing apples with apples, talking the same language. Secondly, I'll note, just for whatever value it adds to councillors, Audit New Zealand, they've obviously looked at the agenda, seen that this is the proposed policy. Due to time constraints, they've done a quick look at it to start with, and they've indicated that they're quite happy, without putting words in their mouth, with those definitions so far, because they haven't raised any issues with us about it. So that doesn't mean that the definitions can't change, but just to note that they so far haven't flagged with us that it's an issue.
Just a quick question on page 1 of 22, and I might be splitting hairs, but in 2.2, this policy relates only to the Timaru District Council and not the Timaru District Council group. I've never heard the word group used around this table, so I just wonder, does it exclude, if I'm reading that, I'm wondering if it includes the subsidiaries of council. Are we talking about the CCOs? What are we talking about when we say group? I'd just like a more specific definition.
Thank you, Councillor Piddington. You will have seen the term group, because every time you approve the annual report, it mentions the group. And therefore, again, we're trying to get this consistency across the board to recognise when we're talking about council and when we're talking about council plus subsidiaries, which CCOs, CCTOs, anything like that. So all of these policies, and I think we've discussed this previously in the context of some other policies as well, relate solely to council. And the implication often, or the belief is often that, hey, this applies to all of the subsidiaries of council, but they have to separately and individually take on board either this or a similar policy. So TDHL, for example, should have its own treasury management policy. And the degree to that complies with these. So
I understand that, but if I read that, I just wonder what we're excluding, and just wonder whether we should, since we're only going to have two, aren't we?
Now, yes, as of
Two,
today.
that they are mentioned by name. I'm just wanting some clarity, that was all.
We can make that clearer.
Councillor Pye, go for it.
You got about three. 6.4, you've taken out the word balance sheet in there. So we may use debt for the following purposes: general debt to fund council's activities. Are we now saying we can borrow to fund OPEX?
You always could. You always could borrow to fund OPEX. That has explicitly been one of the things you were allowed to do, not necessarily preferentially, but allowed to do, yeah.
And it's just that in practice, we do not, or do so in very limited circumstances. So it's been updated to reflect the wide range of options that are available to you, whether you choose to take those up or not.
Sorry, 11.3, so it's on page 171 of the meeting papers. Could you just explain to me in plain English what that means? Because I tried to read it about 10 times and we're never going to meet that ratio.
To be clear, by ratio, do you mean 110%? Yeah.
That's the one we discussed, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. My understanding is that I asked the same question, and my understanding that that ratio is embedded into the LTP assumptions.
Because it's kind of suggesting that we need a headroom of at least 110% over the maximum net debt. So if we've got debt of 200 million, do we need 200 million of headroom? That's never going to happen. Or whatever the mass is, 220%.
That's a good question, and I would defer to my my CFO, who is the one who put together those numbers. So now I'm my soon-to-be ex-CFO by the look she just gave me.
You can come back to me on that, but I could not, no matter which way I thought about how that was worded, I couldn't quite understand
It could be
what
just
it's
the wording
saying.
doesn't represent the policy, and
yeah.
that's fair enough. I'm almost certain that you're correct, that it does seem unlikely that we'd have to have a headroom of double our...
Okay, all good. Any further? Yeah, all good. Any further? No, that's cool. So go back to the resolution. Anything more from the officers? Sorry, Brendan, apologies.
Just to go through the revenue and financing policy briefly. So this policy outlines the overall principles-based approach for funding operating expenditure and capital expenditure. So for each activity, it breaks down the view of the perceived public versus private benefit, and therefore how much of that activity should be funded out of general rates, subsidised out of general rates, versus user pays fees and charges. There's been one small change here. The report mentions 2, and I'd just like to note there's a mistake in the report, 18.1, my mistake, where that reference to the financial contributions policy was accidentally brought into the final draft from an earlier draft. So I would request that the reference to deleted material at 3.5 is expunged from the record, and we keep that reference in. The one material change, therefore, is clause 5.5, which simply notes the implementation of the bid targeted rate, which reflects the previous resolutions of this council. Other than that, there have been some track changes, such as updating the groups of activities to reflect some changes for this LTP, which are, in that sense, non-material. I'll simply briefly outline that the options available to council are to give option 1 draft approval to the 2 policies, or option 2 to amend either or both of them prior to draft approval. I will just quickly note, Arawhenua were provided with copies of these policies, They've kindly got back to us and noted that they have no specific feedback. They're comfortable with the policies as they are. At that point, I will just pause and again open up for questions.
Further
Yes,
questions?
just on page
Councillor Booth.
168.
168.
168, down the near 8.3 and 8.3.1, there's your net annual interest expense, and this is LGF's current covenants are 30% of annual rates income. Now, that's obviously, that's where I got that number from before.
Right.
Net annual interest, not to exceed 20%, well, we were 15%. So I don't really see that as a change. That should actually be read if you're increasing that to 20%.
So to clarify, those are the current covenants by the LGFA. They are not the current financial position of council. I do have a present for you, Councillor Booth, by the way, which is at a previous meeting you requested information about how those covenants have changed over time. So I've got it from the horse's mouth from the LGFA, and I'll laminate it, frame it, etc. and send it to you accordingly. Yeah, but no, fair credit to the LGFA. They were really good in terms of providing that information. So I'm happy to go through that with you offline and make that nice and clear.
So has that number increased? Whereabouts is that listed in this finance policy?
Clarify, you mean the increase from 15 to 20?
Yeah.
So it doesn't need to be listed in this particular policy. It would be listed along with the other financial information as part of the LTP, such as in the financial strategy. This document in this part simply outlines for that section what the maxims are according to the current covenants. We have added in under 8.2 that requested information around what our self-imposed debt limit is, and the proposed wording reflects Council's previous view that 2.5 would be the proposed change. Which of course can change based on any final resolutions. Whilst we can add some more information into that if council really wishes, I would suggest that it would, the more we get into the detail, the more we replicate information that's in other documents, the more we make the policy unusable.
I guess for the sake of consistency, the last 3 long-term plans have actually had that number in there, plus they've had the debt limit. It's been quite clear and clearly laid out.
But to be clear, not in this policy. Do you mean somewhere else within the document?
Yeah, so this
if you look at the
in the
track changes,
finance,
it's not in this document.
In the finance and policy, whatever it is, the finance and, yeah. Right, okay.
Yeah, so this is
So this is feeding into that.
Correct, it's all part of a package, and the intention is that they all sing from the same song sheet in slightly different ways.
Okay.
They're all legislatively required to do different bits and pieces. It's all part of the jigsaw.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Pye.
And that same section is where that liquidity of 110% is, so it's an LGFA thing that we were talking about before.
Correct, that section does refer to that.
Sorry, so I just had one comment. And on 7.2, which is on page 192, we say that we've determined that the following sources may be used to fund operating expenditure and borrowing. Can we add to that subject to 6.13? Because on the page before we say council does not borrow for operational expenditure unless it is deemed to be prudent. So I just kind of feel like I know you can still borrow to do it, but I just feel like if you're reading this and you just read that section, you go, yippee, we can borrow, and may miss 6.13.
We can easily and happily do that for you. That's an easy fix.
Alrighty, on that happy note, all good? Happy to move that, Councillor Pye? Yeah, Councillor Piddington? Thank you. Any further discussion for the motion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thanks, team. That was 9.11. We've done 9.12. Now go to 9.13, which is page 238. Welcome back, Mark, and that is membership of Local Government New Zealand. And as background, so page 238, and I'll let Mark speak to it briefly, but as background, I did commit to us, or do I need to use this bit of order there, team? Come on. Oh, page 238? Yep. Alrighty, after page 237. Brilliant, thank you. So we did commit to bringing this back every year as consideration, so that is, and so I'll just pass to Mark, just briefly introduce, and then we can, probably perhaps myself and the Chief Executive can talk to it as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. This paper is simply to ask you to consider your membership options of Local Government New Zealand. LGNZ, as you well know, is a membership organisation that serves predominantly the elected members of territorial authorities and regional councils, as opposed to Taituara, which represents the officers' interests. Timaru District Council has had an interesting relationship with LGNZ over the course of the years and has taken a stand on some significant matters. What's being requested of you is simply to confirm or deny your membership for the next 12 months, based on the premise that a membership organisation should be delivering value to its members, and councillors, elected members, should actually have a high degree of confidence and comfort that, in actual fact, that is the case. A matter for consideration, of course, is that LGNZ does provide induction training and other elected member professional development as a critical component of any elected member's journey through a territorial or regional council. And if in fact a withdrawal from LGNZ is to occur, that you consider how you actually compensate for that professional development as elected members. I haven't made a recommendation in here as to one way or the other, given that LGNZ as a membership body is your body and not an officer's body.
Thanks, Mark, appreciate that. And look, I think we discussed this, a year ago. It was on the elected members to make something of it. I know having accompanied a lot of the elected members to various conferences and meetings, the content has been mixed. I'll just briefly describe our last meeting, and unfortunately I think you missed probably the best one we've had, but both myself and Chief Executive attended on Thursday and Friday last week for Zone 5 and 6, which was South Island meeting in Christchurch, and probably the connection with the ministers, and this would have been partly led because we had a chair, Mayor Dan from Waimakariri, that led the agenda and what have you, but the connection with the ministers last week was invaluable as to where we want to take the district and our aspirations. As an example, that connection around the MPS was really, really crucial, and we had an open door to come and have a conversation about it. Likewise with Minister Brown, and so although I think you will know I haven't been happy as you haven't in the past, my own recommendation at this stage would actually be to stay in Local Government New Zealand, and I know I have wavered over the years, but I think this crucial time when we've got the opportunity with a government that we actually supported through C4LD and some of the other initiatives, I think there's an opportunity to gain favour and also gain some good outcomes, and one of the vehicles by which we achieve contact with the central government is through LGNZ and at those meetings. So that's sort of, I don't know, Nigel, if you wanted to speak to the meeting from, and that was your first, so you might be able to give some insights.
So I would have to agree, the ability to network and also hear from those ministers and other speakers, like the New Zealand Initiative, was probably invaluable. I wonder while we're going through this period of change, particularly water and so forth, whether we need to be part of the overall so that we can actually put our best foot forward in terms of what is coming at us.
Thank you, but happy to hear from, because I know there's been mixed views from and mixed meetings, so Councillor Pai.
I'm one of those ones who had a terrible experience and was happy to get out, but I'm actually happy just to go with your guidance given the more recent interactions, and I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Brilliant, thank you. Any further discussion? Everyone comfortable? Yes, no, that's fine, thank you. Councillor Burt.
Yeah, I'll second that. Obviously, the bulldozer driven by DIA is broken down and they've all got off onto my way and now going our way. So, yeah, good as gold.
Brilliant. Further discussion, we've got a mover and a seconder. Put the motion, put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the paper on that, and we'll bring that back again. So next one is 9.14, which is Venture Timaru Limited Director Appointment Extension. And so this was, I can just keep going if you like, this was just to tidy up the extensions. They were out of sync, so we wanted to realign them with the AGM. So this affects three, being Councillor Scott, who's appointed as an independent, not via council, Anthony Howie and Anthony Bryan, and so that would bring them in line with the AGM, which would be my recommendation to tidy this up, as it was a bit of an anomaly and sort of worked out of sync, if you like. Did you have anything to add, Mark?
Yes, there's only one other point that does need to be tidied up, and certainly aligning it with an annual meeting makes good corporate sense. In terms of that governance position, there is one directorship that has actually been expired for, hasn't been written confirmed since the 31st of March 2023. Now, that's not to say it hasn't been offered and accepted verbally, it just hasn't been confirmed in writing.
Yeah.
So that I'm suggesting that we need to retrospectively approve that and extend it to the AGM.
Yeah, perfect. So is everyone comfortable with that? Yeah. So I'm happy to move that. Seconder, Councillor Oliver, perfect. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Just tidying that stuff up. So we've done council housing. We're going to move, just before we move into public excluded, I'd just like to move that Brett King from Fulton Hogan, who's helped support the work from the 17A review, stay in through the PX session. So I'm happy to move that. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Jackson, thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So I'll move us now to public excluded. Can I have a seconder? Yes, Councillor Burt, thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Thanks, Shane. Appreciate it. That's the longest meeting ever. I know, yeah, except for Geraldine.